Hello friends and potential friends. The other day I mentioned to a friend of mine that I need to do some canning. I've got tomatoes in the freezer that I need to get out of there and make room for hopefully putting some peppers in there pretty soon. What I didn't mention was before I can do that canning, I need to do some repairs. So this is going to be a little bit different from what I usually put up. I hope you get something out of it. Maybe it'll help somebody. See, I've got this old timer stove. It's an old GE range, and not that long ago I had a little bit of excitement with it. Now, to understand, this thing's been in this house since I bought the house back in 1992, and it was not new even then. But I like my old timers because they tend to be simple and easy to fix, and they seem to last forever when you take care of them. Well, I was cooking breakfast one day and had a little bit of a problem. You can see that little notch out of the heating element there. That element shorted out, probably because of bacon grease on it. Produced a pretty blue electric flame and a sound that sounded like a big transformer blowing up. So of course I grabbed the iron skillet that was on it, got that off the burner, made sure the flames were out, and then started looking to see what I was going to do to make this thing work again. It was interesting. It went right through that heating element. And to be honest, the stove probably saved me because I was barefoot at the time. I grabbed an iron skillet with my bare hand off of a burner that was shorting out because of the electricity, and I didn't get shocked. And I credit that solely to the stove. So anyway, when I do my canning, I need at least 3 of these burners, preferably the 2 big ones and 1 of the small ones. So I went online and started looking for parts and found a replacement burner. Put it right in there. Real simple. Now, keep in mind when you have to buy replacement burners, some have 6 coils, some only have 5. Make sure you get the ones that fit your stove. Mine all had 6, so that's what I went with. Since I was going to go into this thing anyway, I decided I'd go ahead and replace all 4 of the burners. The big one is an 8-inch burner, and you can get a 6-inch burner for the small ones, or a heating element. Again, I made sure I got this one's a 5 coil, it looks like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I think the smaller one's a 4 coil. But I got the coils that match the stove. Also, when I looked into it, I found that some of the wiring was getting kind of brittle. So I went ahead and ordered 4 of these wiring connectors. I'll show you where those go in a minute. And I also got digging around behind the thing and found that one of my switches had burned out. Same switch that operates the big coil there. So I got a new replacement switch for it. Now, if you do have to replace those switches, be aware that there are 2 different sizes of switches. The 6-inch coils, the small ones, I believe that takes a 1250 watt switch, and the larger coils takes a 1500 watt switch. Make sure you get the right ones. So anyway, these things, you probably know that the heating elements themselves just plug in. Got 2 prongs there, and they go into the connector, which is right there. Pardon the grease. This is probably also a good time to get rid of all those years of grease that have built up, and I'll be doing a little bit better job of that too before I finish. But to do this job, oh, and incidentally, while I was in there, I went ahead and bought new underplates for them too, so it all looked pretty. Might as well do it right. Got to keep this old timer going. Now, to do this job, You're just going to need your parts. As you can see, I bought 4 of the wiring kits, and I bought all 4 heating elements. These are the old ones over here. They're not in too bad a shape, but I figured since I was going into this already, might as well get replacements. And as you can see, those underplates were getting kind of cruddy. The only tools you're really going to need for this: small Phillips screwdriver. You need that specifically to take the switch out, and then a little 1/4-inch nut driver to take everything else apart, and some kind of pliers. So let's get into here and I'll show you what I found. First off, GE range, the cooking surface comes up, and then underneath you can see that's where the electrical connector plugs in. This takes a single bolt or screw or whatever, 1/4-inch, to take that thing loose. Then you have to run the wiring back to the back of this guy. As you can see, that one is currently out, so I'll be putting that one back in a moment. Probably the hardest part about this whole job is going to be getting that stove out of that little cubby hole it's in. There's not a whole lot of clearance, so I'm going to do that offline, and then I'll bring you back when I've got it pulled out here to where I can get to it. Okay, we got the stove out of the cubby hole. I got to do a little bit more cleaning. Number one importance: before you do anything else, unplug the stove. That's a 220 volt or 240 volt stove. You don't want that running through your body while you're playing with the electronics. And the next step is to take your nut driver and remove, in this case, 6 little screws. Put them somewhere where you won't lose them, because you're going to need them when you put all this back together again. And then you just pull this through from the tab, and there's the electronics. It's really not that complicated. One set of wiring for each of the burners going up to the back of the switch. A couple other bits of wiring that have the lights to tell you what's going on. And this one actually has a little circuit board in it. I'm surprised. I didn't know they were using those things back in the, well, when did they make this? My guess would be probably in the 70s or 80s. But anyway, that's that part of it. I'm going to swing you around here now. I have to replace this switch. Pull the knob off. Here's where I need the Phillips screwdriver. Take out these 2 little screws. And then the switch comes out to the back. I'll bring you around, and there's the switch. Now, one thing you know, well, you see there are a couple of plugs that are not plugged in right now, because I actually got in here a week or so ago before I got that switch ordered, and I took the large coil on the front, which I use all the time, and I pulled the wires that I needed to and plugged them into the next switch over. And that's where I learned that there are 2 different voltages on these switches, because this second switch over here is for one of the small burners and does not put out as much power as the big burner needs. In order to cook bacon, I had to put that big burner on high when it was going through this switch. So anyway, that was a lesson I learned. Now what I'm going to do, and incidentally, pay close attention to this switch. This is the new one. Got this little, basically it's a resistor, a variable resistor. That's what varies the amount of power that goes to the burner. And in a minute, when I get that old one out of there, I'll show you something else that's interesting, which probably was a lifesaver. Now, when I replace switches like this, basically what I do is line them up together next to each other, and swap cables. That's where the pliers come in. These knife edge connectors have been on here for 30 years or more. I didn't want to damage the wires when I took them off, so basically just take one wire at a time, take it off of the old switch, and then plug it in to the new switch, to the corresponding knife edge connector. Try to make them to where they stay. I'm going to have to fight with that one a little bit. That one went on. Why doesn't that one want to go on? Okay, I'm going to have to do some adjustments with that. There is a little pin in there that has to go over that knife edge connector. Okay, I'm going to fight with that one a bit offline. Let me get this third wire out of here so that I can put it onto the appropriate connector. And before I switch off of this, let me show you the back end of this old connector. You notice that that little variable resistor bar is gone. It's actually right here. And that is probably what kept me from getting a shock, because this thing burned off of the switch. Supposed to sit in there, oh, roughly like so, and it's actually supposed to be attached. So that burned off when the switch shorted out, and that kept me from getting a nasty shock when I grabbed hold of that cast iron pan. Now let me shut this off for a minute, and I'm going to go ahead and fight with that last switch or last wire that doesn't want to go on there right. Okay, I had to separate the connectors on that one wire a little bit to get it to go on there. Now I'm going to take the two wires to control the burner itself that I had connected to the second switch, put them back on the first switch, the new switch, and then we just have to put it back through the face of the stove and put the two screws back in, which is easier said than done when your eyes are getting to be like mine, but we're going to get this done. And incidentally, I didn't mention that for that front burner, I've already replaced the wiring harness that goes out to the heating element. So putting this together will give me everything on that front burner will be replaced. And then I can put the switch back on, hopefully. I can see where it goes. Okay, maybe I can't. Looks like that connector may be a little bit different from the previous one. Yeah, might have some issues with that switch. Have to do some modification. You see that guy, I hope you can see this, that guy is a little half moon shaped thing. But the switch, or the post itself, is not the half moon. Let me show you the difference between these two. Here, I think you can see the difference. The one on the left is an original. It's kind of half moon shaped. The one on the right is kind of squared off. It's going to actually take a slightly different switch. But I will probably just modify this switch to make it fit. All I really have to do is make sure that it lines up with the on and off. That's off. And I'll have to do some modifications to get that guy to go on there. For now, I'm going to go ahead and continue on with the job, because I want to replace, oh, I don't have to replace that switch, but I do have to replace the wiring harness for it. So grab one of these wiring harnesses ones. Oop, there should be a screw in there too. No, I guess that one didn't come with a new screw. So I'll have to use one of the old screws that I had. And basically, let's see if I can get this on the camera. Put the wire down underneath for right now. And this guy just slips over that little tab, and then the retaining screw goes down in there and tightens it in. Then we have to go underneath and run that wire up through the back and into the back of the stove. So I'm going to have to lift the lid for that to do that. I'll bring you back when we're ready to plug things in on this back end side. Okay, I've got the wire run through. So now I just need to plug it into the back of the second switch. One there. One there. And we're pretty much completed. And that's all there is to it. Now I'm going to go ahead and replace the two wiring harnesses on the left hand side, or over on this side, I don't know, I guess that's the right to you. I'm going to go ahead and replace the wiring harnesses for these two burners since I brought new ones. Then I'll button it all back up and we'll see if it works. And buttoning it up is just a matter of putting the tab back, or putting that back into the tab and putting those 6 screws back in. So I'll bring you back when I get ready to show you anything better. Okay, got all the wiring harnesses replaced. Went ahead and put the back plate back on. Next step in the process is to go ahead and plug it back in. And then I have to try to fit that stove back into that little cubby hole, which I'm going to do a little bit of cleaning before I do that. And you don't want to watch me fighting with that thing because there's only about 1/8 of an inch clearance on either side of it when it goes in there. But if I'm successful in getting it back in there, I'll bring you back and we'll show you the next step. Okay, I succeeded in getting the stove back into the cubby. Let's see if it works. As you can see, power fault, but it is, well, no, you can't see. Here. Power fault. That means it was unplugged, or Florida Power and Light took my electrons away from me. So I'll have to set the clock again. But let's go ahead and see if that back burner works. And you simply do that by, whoo, that's getting hot fast. That one's working good. I'm still going to have to play with this switch on this guy, but let's go ahead and see if it works. And yep, that one's getting hot as well. So I'll play with that switch and get it back on there, or I might have to go ahead and order a new switch for it, for that to come in. But they both got hot. Okay, a few final thoughts, maybe some safety tips. When you're running the wiring harnesses for the different burners, make sure you run the wires so that they don't get anywhere near any of the other burners. My stove has got a couple of wire clips on each side of the stove so that the wires coming from the front burners run down the side of the stove instead of getting anywhere near the back burners. Also, when you run the wires to the back of the stove, it's a pretty tight little space there, so make sure that the wires aren't going to get pinched once they're installed. You don't want to have to redo this thing anytime soon. And by all means, if you see a pretty blue electrical flame with arcing and sparking, especially if you're barefooted, don't grab that cast iron pan. I'll see you next time.